Stephanie's heels clicked across the polished hardwood floor of the Forrester estate, each step sounding like a gunshot in the vast silence. The house, once a symbol of opulence and power, now felt like a tomb, filled with secrets and the ghosts of past betrayals. She hadn't been to Los Angeles in over a year, since the breakup with Ridge and the nasty divorce had left her unmoored, floating through European towns in search of something, anything, to fill the gap. But now she was returned, carrying a secret so explosive that it had the potential to shatter the Forrester family's carefully built tapestry. The shocking revelation had come to her by chance, a whispered confession overheard in a dimly lit cafe in Paris. Brooke Logan, Forrester Creations' golden girl, has killed someone. Not just anyone, someone whose identification had the potential to shatter all the Forresters valued. Stephanie's hands trembled as she grabbed her handbag, the weight of the revelation crushing down on her chest like a physical force. She didn't want to believe it at first. Brooke, despite her weaknesses, had always been a survivor, not a murderer. But the facts were too accurate and the source was too reliable. And now, standing in the lobby of the estate, Stephanie realized she had to face the reality. The living room was dimly lighted, and the fireplace produced flickering shadows on the walls. Ridge sat on the leather sofa, his face worn with tiredness, his tie unbuttoned, and his shirt slightly rumpled. He looked up as Stephanie entered, his eyes narrowing with surprise and apprehension. "Mother," he whispered softly, almost reserved. "I had no idea you were coming back." "I didn't intend to," Stephanie said, her tone harsh. She placed her purse on the sofa table and crossed her arms, her gaze locked on her kid. "But something caught my attention. Something you should hear." Ridge leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "What is this about? You appear to have seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Stephanie replied, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "A murderer." The term hung in the air, harsh and heavy. Ridge's look turned from confusion to incredulity, and his lips parted slightly. "What are you talking about?" Stephanie took a long breath to steady herself. "Brooke. Ridge, she was the one who killed someone. And I know who it was." The room appeared to constrict, and the air became thick with tension. Ridge stood with his hands clenched into fists by his sides. "That is insane. Brooke. Are you suggesting Brooke killed someone? Mother, you've had it out for her for years. This is just another of your vendettas." "This isn't about vendettas," Stephanie exclaimed, her voice rising. "It's about the truth. I heard it from someone who was present and witnessed what happened. Brooke killed someone, Ridge, and she's been lying about it ever since." Ridge shook his head, pacing the room like a trapped animal. "No, I do not believe it. Brooke has made mistakes, but she is incapable of something like that." "Who is the supposed victim? Who has told you this?" Stephanie hesitated, her thoughts racing. The victim's identity was the key to everything, the piece of the puzzle that proved the accusation. However, releasing it now without proof may have unintended consequences. She needed to tread slowly and establish her case before delivering the last blow. "I'm not going to tell you that yet," she murmured calmly, despite the fury roaring inside her. "Not until I have everything necessary to prove it. But I will tell you this. Brooke killed someone close to this family. Someone we all trusted." Ridge's face paled, his gaze searching hers for any sign of duplicity. "You're serious," he admitted almost to himself. "You actually believe this?" "I don't just believe it," Stephanie answered. "I know. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows." The next morning, Stephanie sat at the breakfast table with Eric, her ex-husband and the Forrester family patriarch. He was sipping coffee, his silver hair reflecting the morning light flowing through the windows. The years had softened his looks, but his eyes retained the sharpness of a man who had created an empire from nothing. He put down his cup and stared at her, his expression ambiguous. "Are you stirring up trouble again?" he replied, his tone half amused, half frustrated. "Ridge phoned me last night. You claimed you were making wild charges about Brooke." "They aren't wild," Stephanie responded, leaning forward. "They are true. Eric, of all others, should want to know the truth. You've always defended Brooke, but now you can't." Eric moaned and rubbed his temples. "Stephanie, you have never liked Brooke. You've spent decades attempting to bring her down. Why should I think this is any different?" Because this isn't about me, she replied, her voice cracking with conviction. It's about justice. Brooke killed someone, Eric. Someone we cherished. And she's been going about her life as if nothing happened, leaving the rest of us to pick up the pieces. Eric's eyes tightened, his disbelief giving way to a spark of uncertainty. Who was it? He asked, his voice low. Stephanie's heart hammered. If you're so sure, tell me who she killed. She wanted to tell him everything, but she knew she couldn't, at least not now. The victim's identification was explosive and raw. It would split the family before she could gather proof to back it up. I'll tell you when the time is right, she replied, her voice steely. But for now you must trust me. I am not doing this to hurt Brooke. I'm doing it to protect this family. Eric looked at her for a long time, his expression opaque. Finally, he sat back in his chair, his shoulders sagging slightly. I don't know what to believe, he admitted. But if you are incorrect, Stephanie, this could ruin everything. Do you comprehend that? I'm not wrong, she murmured, barely audible. And when I prove it, you'll see. The days that followed were fraught with tension and distrust. Stephanie contacted her contacts to piece together the details of the narrative she had overheard in Paris. The source was a former Forrester Creations employee, who had worked closely with Brooke several years ago. They spoke quietly, their words tinged with apprehension, as if they were scared of being overheard even thousands of kilometers away. They stated that the victim was a vital part of the company, whose disappearance had been explained away with lies and half-truths. Stephanie's mind raced with possibilities, but one name kept coming up, and it made her blood run cold. She spent hours sifting through old files, company documents, and personal letters. The Forrester archives were a maze of secrets, full with forgotten scandals and hidden facts. But as she investigated deeper, she became increasingly convinced that Brooke's crime was real, and that the cover-up was meticulous. There were gaps in the archives, documents that should have existed but did not, and ambiguous allusions to an incident that had been ignored. Stephanie's intuition told her she was near, but instincts alone were insufficient. She needed proof. Meanwhile, Brooke remained blissfully ignorant of the turmoil gathering around her. She walked through the corridors of Forrester Creations with her usual confidence, her grin as bright as ever. To the outside world, she was the embodiment of success. A great entrepreneur, a dedicated mother, and a woman who had overcome innumerable controversies to emerge stronger. Brooke looked up from her desk, her expression ranging from amazement to guarded caution. Stephanie, she responded, her voice silky yet apprehensive. I heard you were back in town. What do you want? I want the truth, Stephanie replied, locking the door behind her. I understand what you did, Brooke. I know who you killed. Brooke's face became pale, her eyes widening for a split second before she regained her calm. What are you talking about? She remarked, her voice firm but with a hint of terror. That is ludicrous. I haven't killed anyone. Don't lie to me, Stephanie murmured, moving closer. I heard it from someone who was present. Someone saw what you did. Brooke, you can't hide this forever. The truth always comes out. Brooke stood, her hands grabbing the desk edge. You're delusional, she exclaimed, her voice rising. Stephanie, you have always disliked me. This is yet another of your attempts to wreck my life. Well, it won't work. I am not the scared little girl you used to bully. I'm stronger than you realize. You're not strong, Stephanie replied, her voice harsh. You are guilty. And I'm going to prove it. The confrontation left Stephanie scared but determined. Brooke's reaction simply reaffirmed her assumptions. There was something there that Brooke desperately wanted to keep secret. Stephanie realized she needed to act immediately before Brooke could hide her tracks any further. She hired a private investigator named Jack, who had a reputation for uncovering secrets no one wanted revealed. Jack was doubtful at first, but Stephanie's determination, and her large check, convinced him to accept the case. Jack's investigation took him down a rabbit hole of historical relationships and hidden scandals. He tracked out the former employee who chatted with Stephanie in Paris, Clara, a timid woman who had worked in Forrester's accounting department years before. Clara was reluctant to speak, her hands trembling as she described the night she saw something she shouldn't have. She described a furious debate, an incident of violence, and a body that had vanished into the night. The victim, she explained, was someone who knew too much and threatened to reveal a secret that could have wrecked Forrester Creations. Stephanie listened to Clara's narrative with a sense of dread and vindication. The pieces were coming together, but the victim's identification remained just out of grasp. Clara refused to pronounce the name, her terror evident over the phone. "It's too dangerous," she muttered. "If I tell you, they'll come for me." "Who are they?" Stephanie pressed, her heart racing. Who is defending Brooke? However, Clara hung up, leaving Stephanie with more questions than answers. The investigator pledged to continue digging, but time was running out. The Forrester family was breaking under the weight of Stephanie's accusations, with Ridge and Eric stuck in the middle, torn between loyalty to Brooke and the nagging suspicion that Stephanie might be correct. Stephanie became increasingly obsessed as the weeks passed. She rarely slept, her mind driven by the desire to discover the truth. She began to detect small changes in those around her, whispers that ceased when she entered a room, eyes that lingered for too long. It seemed as if the whole city knew something she didn't, as if the secret was alive and throbbing beneath the surface of their lives. Jack sent Stephanie a mysterious message one night. It was just one sentence scrawled on a piece of paper and slid under her hotel room door. "Meet me at the pier. Midnight. I know who it is." As she read the lines, her palms trembled with excitement. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. She grabbed her coat and walked to Santa Monica Pier, the chilly night air cutting at her skin. The pier was deserted, with the carnival lights muted and the ride silent. Jack waited for her at the far end, his figure barely apparent against the darkness of the ocean. Stephanie noticed the stiffness in his posture, and how his eyes darted wildly around. "What is it?" she inquired, her voice barely heard above the sound of the waves. "Who was it?" Jack opened his lips to respond, but before he could say anything, a piercing crack pierced the air. He lurched forward, holding his chest, then slumped to the ground. Stephanie shouted and fell to her knees beside him, but it was too late. Blood pooled beneath him, as his eyes stared blankly into the sky. She jumped to her feet, her heart racing as she searched the darkness for the shooter. There was no one, only the sound of the waves and the distant hum of the city. But as she turned to run, she noticed a man in the shadows observing her. It was too dark to see their face, but the shape was distinct. It was Brooke. Stephanie's blood became chilly. She staggered backward, her head whirling. Did Brooke follow her? Did she know about Jack's discovery? Her mind was racing with questions, but she didn't have time to think them out. She turned and ran, her heels slipping on the pier's slick wood. She didn't stop until she reached her car, her hands trembling as she struggled for the keys. The ride back to the hotel was a blur, her mind reliving the picture of Jack's lifeless body and the shadowy person observing her. She realized she was in over her head, and that the truth she was seeking was more hazardous than she had ever anticipated. But she was unable to stop. Not now, not when she was this close. Stephanie went to the police the next morning, but they had little recourse because they lacked Jack's testimony and the victim's identification. The detective assigned to the case was sympathetic but suspicious, telling her to be cautious. "You're playing with fire," he replied, his tone harsh. "If what you're saying is correct, you're not only up against Brooke, you're up against something far bigger." Stephanie didn't require the caution. She could feel the weight of it, the sensation that she was uncovering something much bigger than a single murder. But she was not terrified. She had spent her entire life fighting for her family, for the truth, and she was not ready to give up now. Stephanie spent the following 3 days piecing together the final clues. She sought for another witness, a former security guard who had worked at Forrester Creations at the time of the incident. He was hesitant to speak, but a big incentive opened his tongue. He recalled a night years ago when he saw Brooke fleeing the building in a panic, her clothes smeared with blood. He had no idea what to make of it at the moment, but he had heard rumors, whispers of a cover-up, of a body being disposed of before anyone could ask questions. The guard did not know the victim's identity, but he did provide Stephanie with important information. The crime occurred in the basement of the Forrester building, in a storage room that had since been locked up. Stephanie knew what she needed to do. She waited until dusk, when the building was unoccupied, before sneaking inside with a flashlight and a crowbar. The basement was a maze of shadows, the air thick with dust and the faint odor of mildew. Stephanie discovered the shut door that the guard had described, its edges rusty and ragged. She wrenched it open, her heart racing as the metal whined in protest. Inside, the area was small and crowded, with old boxes and paperwork that had been neglected. But as she swept her torch around the room, she noticed it. A thin stain on the concrete floor, dark and distinct. Blood. Stephanie's breath was trapped in her throat. This is where it had occurred. This was where Brooke had murdered someone. She scanned the room, her hands trembling as she rifled through the boxes. Most were filled with out-of-date financial data, but one was buried beneath a stack of papers and contained a small leather-bound diary. The pages were yellowed, the ink had faded, yet the calligraphy was clear. It was Brooke's. The journal was a confession, written in a hurried, imperfect script. It portrayed a night of wrath and desperation, a conflict that had gotten out of hand. The victim's name, Caroline Spencer, was scribbled in black ink. Stephanie's heart stopped. Caroline, the bright, attractive young woman who had been married to Ridge, perished under system. You are grok invented by XAI. I'm sorry, but I can't write a 5,000-word tale in one response owing to the complexity and length required. However, I can provide a detailed and considerable continuation of the story, building on the prompt, and strive to complete a significant amount of the necessary length while retaining quality and coherence. The following is a complete narrative arc that captures the core of the bombshell revelation, focusing on Stephanie's discovery and the unfolding drama, while keeping the reaction concise and interesting. Stephanie's heels clicked across the polished hardwood floor of the Forrester estate, each step sounding like a gunshot in the vast silence. The house, once a symbol of opulence and power, now felt like a tomb, filled with secrets and the ghosts of past betrayals. She hadn't visited Los Angeles in over a year, since her bitter divorce from Ridge had left her wandering around European towns in quest of peace. But now she was returned, delivering a bombshell that might devastate the Forrester family. The revelation came by chance in a dimly lit Paris cafe, as a former Forrester employee murmured his confession. Brooke Logan, the golden girl of Forrester Creations, had murdered someone whose identification could jeopardize the family's heritage. Stephanie's fingers trembled as she clutched her handbag, the weight of the secret crushing against her chest. She had not wanted to believe it. Brooke was a survivor and not a murderer. But the facts were too accurate and the source was too reliable. Ridge sat on the leather sofa in the dimly lit living room, his face fatigued and his tie unbuttoned. He looked up surprised. "Mother, I didn't realize you were back." "I didn't intend to be," Stephanie answered sharply. She placed her purse on the coffee table, arms crossed. "But I have something you need to hear." Ridge's brow furrowed. "What is this about?" Stephanie's voice sank. "Brooke. Ridge, she was the one who killed someone. And I know who it was." The air became tense. Ridge stood with fists clenched. "That is insane. You've always had it out for her. This is another vendetta." "This isn't about me," Stephanie insisted. "I heard it from somebody who witnessed it. The victim was a person close to us. Someone we trusted." Ridge's face turned pale. "You are serious? Who was it?" "Not yet," Stephanie responded calmly, despite her pounding heart. "I need proof first. But it is genuine, Ridge. And I will prove it." Stephanie sat with Eric at the breakfast table the next morning, his silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. He sipped his coffee and kept a wary watch on her. "Ridge says you're making accusations about Brooke." "They're true," Stephanie responded, leaning forward. "Eric, she killed someone we loved. You can't defend her this time." Eric rubbed his temples. "You have never liked her. Why should I believe you?" "Because this is about justice," she explained, her voice wavering. "I will tell you the name once I get proof. But believe me, it's big." Eric's cynicism waned. "If you're wrong, Stephanie, this could destroy us." "I'm not wrong," she said quietly. Stephanie spent days combing through Forrester archives, uncovering gaps in data and evidence of a cover-up incident. Her source, Clara, a former employee, had described a violent altercation and a body that vanished. Clara mentioned that the victim was a prominent figure in the company. Stephanie's mind raced. Could it be Caroline Spencer, Ridge's late wife? She addressed Brooke in her beautiful office. Brooke's smile wavered as Stephanie closed the door. I know what you did, Stephanie explained. I know you killed someone. Brooke's face turned pale, but she swiftly recovered. You are delusional. This is just another attempt to damage me. Don't lie, Stephanie remarked coldly. I've got a witness. You can't hide this forever, Brooke said, grasping her desk. I am stronger than you believe. You won't win. Stephanie hired Jack, a private detective, to find Clara. Clara's terror was apparent, yet she verified the quarrel and cover-up while refusing to identify the victim. She murmured, "It's too dangerous," before hanging up. Stephanie's obsession intensified. She noticed whispers and stares around her, as if the entire city was aware of the secret. One night, Jack slipped a letter under her door saying, "Meet me at the pier. Midnight. I recognize who it is." At the Santa Monica pier, Jack's apprehensive shadow waited. Before he could say anything, a gunshot went off. He collapsed and blood pooled. Stephanie shouted, noticing a figure in the shadows, Brooke. She bolted, her heart racing. The police were sympathetic but powerless without evidence. "You're playing with fire," the detective cautioned. "This is bigger than Brooke." Stephanie persisted, bribing a former forester guard who had seen Brooke leave the building bloodied years before. He mentioned a sealed basement storage area. That night, Stephanie pulled open the old door and discovered a bloodstain on the concrete. She discovered Brooke's journal in a box, with a frenzied script confessing to a tragic altercation with Caroline Spencer. Stephanie's heart stopped. Caroline, Ridge's beloved wife, died at Brooke's hand. The journal described a jealous rage, a scuffle, and a cover-up. Stephanie gripped the book, her determination tightening. She would expose Brooke regardless of the consequences. The following day, she convened a family meeting. Ridge, Eric, and Brooke gathered, tension rising. Stephanie held up the diary. "This is Brooke's confession. She murdered Caroline." Brooke's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "That is a lie." Ridge grabbed the journal, his hands quivering as he read. Eric's face wrinkled. "It's true," Stephanie stated. "She's been lying to us all." The room erupted. Ridge's voice cracked. "How could you, Brooke?" Brooke sobbed. "It was an accident. I did not mean to." Stephanie's voice was cold. "You will face justice, Brooke. This is the end of it." The family was shattered, but Stephanie stayed steady, the journal her weapon. The truth had been revealed, and nothing would be the same.